All right. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Bishop Byron Smith, Sr. I'm the pastor of Gethsemane Christian Love Missionary Baptist Church. Also done a lot of work in the mental health field as a mental health clinician. And I'm pretty excited about being here, and I thank Dr. Richard Flory for giving me this opportunity, and Dr. Najuma and Dr. Soraya. And I see some familiar faces. I've got the task of talking about the holistic approach to leadership strategies for clergy and maintaining personal wellness while serving others. I have an outline. I know we're not going to be able to cover all of the outline, but I just want to make sure that you have it as a tool that when you walk away from here, you still have some thoughts and some ideas and some topics that might need to be addressed. What really brought me to the excitement about the work around mental wellness with clergy, I can remember starting pastoring back in the Midwest in 1998, and I just was locked in theologically. And I thought, praying and trying to equip myself to be theologically sound with my teaching and preaching and loving the people with unconditional positive regard was going to fix everything. And no matter who came through the church doors, I thought, man, if I just love them the way Jesus loved them, if I just prayed for them, because the Bible says, ask and it shall be given. So I just keep praying. The bishop that I was under during that time, he kept challenging me, to really just get outside of myself. And he would always tell me when I would come back with him with some challenges, he would say, preacher, he said, I need for you to keep trusting and believing God. And I would go back and I pray and I keep praying. And I went back to the congregation. Some of the things that was happening, nothing was changing. And so I said, well, baby, I need to finish up my education. And when I was recruited to come out to California, went to Claremont School of Theology in Claremont, yes. And that experience was awesome for me because it opened up my eyes. During that time, I was pastoring in Pasadena. And I thought and was excited to go to Fuller. And the bishop told me, he said, I need for you to go find Claremont. He didn't give me the address. He said, go find Claremont. I said, Bishop, Fuller's right around the corner from the church, right down the street, from where I live. He said, preacher, go find Claremont. And so a 7-minute drive turned into a 55-minute drive, one way. And I had a family, a wife, and children. At the time, they were very little, and trying to pastor a congregation full time. And I remember going into Claremont with my eyes wide open about who I was as a clergyman, what I needed to do to prepare myself for a society that was really in trouble. And the late Dr. Susan Nelson, who was the director at Claremont during that time, she brought me into the office and she said, Byron, she says, we're so happy to have you at Claremont. And I said, I'm happy to be here, and she went on and she took me around her office. She says, anytime you need someone to talk to, she says, I want you to know you're welcome in my office. And I just thought, man, I said, wow, that was amazing for her to not even know me, to invite me to her office and give me the open door to come and talk to her whenever I needed it. And I walked away from that experience feeling really good, but at the same time questioning why would she call me in out of all the seminarians. And then she told me to come back next week. And she said, Byron, she says, I'm just curious. She says, what is the bishop trying to do to you? She said, you're full-time in seminary, you have a wife, you have children, and you're pastoring full-time, raising proportions. I said, I don't know. I said, but I'm here to become what I need to become so I can be a better leader in the church and a better leader in my family. And I realized then that, that whole experience really opened up my eyes to see that it's more than ministry than just the spirituality component. I realized that there was something happening with me, something happening with my family, something happening with my colleagues at Claremont, I saw people just break down emotionally and just lose it because of all the work that they were putting on us. And so I would go back and I would pray and I would go to the library and study. And I realized, I said, man, no matter how much and the desire that I have to get closer to God, there was still a component that I was struggling with. That was the emotional piece. How to handle people, how to handle myself from an emotional standpoint so that I can be all that I can be for God. And so that drove me. After Claremont, a couple years, I went back to school, got another master's in clinical psychology because the Lord said, go back to school, get a second master's in clinical psychology. I was wrestling with God. I said, why do you want me to go back to school and get another master's in counseling? I've got one in pastoral care and counseling. He said, go back and get one in clinical psychology. And so I went back, and the first class, the first professor started lecturing on the difference between pastoral care and clinical counseling. I knew then I was in the right place. But then after a few weeks, the director of the psychology department called me into his office. And he tried to really press me very hard to try to get me to understand why would I come from being so spiritual, now I don't want to come into the science field. And the more he kept pressing me, the more I realized, I said, man, what is it to this, And the more that he pressed me, the more that I realized that I needed this whole clinical piece to really make me whole, to really make me feel good about God, feel good about God's people, and feel good about some of the things that we experience in society. And so when we talk about, healthy ways for clergy, balancing personal and well-being while serving others, that's my whole theology. My whole life is constantly balancing myself between the spiritual component, the mental and the emotional, and the physical component, because I believe that God says we have to love him with our mind, body, and our soul. And so this has been my whole ministry. This is really what I'm about wherever I go, whether I'm in the parish ministry, whether I'm with my family, or whether I'm just alone with God. And so when we talk about this is very important to me, and I'm very excited to be here to present. I don't know why this is not clicking, but let's see if I can do it this way. Let's see here. Let's see. Let me see. I can do this. All right. Oh, here we go. All right. Let's see. Sorry about this. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so some of the items that I'm going to cover very briefly because I only have a few minutes, but I want to talk about the spiritual health and nurturing our own vineyard. So many times we're so highly concerned about the vineyard of other people, the vineyard of the church, that we neglect our own vineyard. Then I want to talk a little bit about the mental and emotional health, the weight of the call. One of the things I realized that there is a heavy weight when you sincerely accept a call from God, because God always calls us to something much larger than ourselves. And then navigating seasons of grief and loss while leading others. And that's one of the things I've experienced, not only grief and loss with losing loved ones, but also grief and loss of being in the itinerant ministry in Methodism, where they move you around every few years, shifting parishes, shifting communities. And so a lot of the grief and loss, I had to really make some adjustments with and learn how to maintain a healthy balance. And then relational health, leading at home and in the church. So many times I see clergy trying to differentiate their leadership of who they are and what they represent in the church, a little bit different at home. And then that brings resentment with your spouse, brings resentments with your children because they see two sides of you. And so one of the things I try to do, the best of my ability, is try to be consistent. Who I am at home is who I am in the church. Who I am in the church is who I am at home. And then setting healthy boundaries. I heard Kimmy talk about boundaries. Boundaries was huge for me, and I learned that through the clinical piece, how important it is to really set healthy boundaries and hold them. Because so many times we know how to set them, but we aren't well enough to hold them, and we give in. And setting boundaries and not holding them is just like not setting them at all. So I want to talk a little bit about healthy boundaries in ministry, protecting relationships from burnout. Boundaries will help you to alleviate from burnout, especially when you set healthy boundaries and maintain them. And then remaining relevant in leadership in changing times. One of the things I learned real quick, moving from Chicago, pastoring in Chicago, where you really have true four seasons, the snow, the heat, the rain, and the hot sun with humidity. When I came to California, I realized, man, just how much emotionally and mentally we adjust to the seasons without even knowing it. But because when I came to Southern California, I woke up, I said, man, I got to get a lot of stuff done. The sun is shining and there's no rain. So I went out and ran. Then the next day came. I said, man, the sun is up again. So I kept running. Weeks went by, then months went by. Then pretty soon they said, hey, it's wintertime, it's summertime. I was like, but the sun is still shining. There's no snow, no change of clothing. And I realized that if I didn't have a healthy balance, I would burn myself out because I was accustomed that when the sun came up, you run and you get all the work that you've done because the snow was coming and you can't move as well as you can in the summer. So when we talk about adjusting to leadership and changing times, I had to learn that really, really quick. Coming from the west side of Chicago, south side of Chicago to Pasadena, one of the parishioners told me after a few months of pastoring there, you are no longer in Chicago. This is the way we do it here. And I was like, wow, that was a reality check because I had to change. I had to change the way I thought about ministry. I had to listen to the congregants, how they perceive the pastor, how they perceive ministry, and what kind of work was going to be done. And if you don't handle that piece well, you can be under a lot of emotional stress. So when we talk about spiritual health and nurturing our own vineyard, I really want us to think about that, the importance of relationship with God. You know, how we view God is how we're going to view people, and how we view God is going to how we view the world. So when we talk about spiritual health, personal relationship with God is essential for maintaining spiritual health and well-being. It nurtures the soul and fosters inner peace. And this is what I really yearn for, is that inner peace, because a lot of the people that we care for don't have inner peace. A lot of the communities that we are attending to don't have inner peace. And if we don't have inner peace, going into a community or a group of people who don't have inner peace, we all are going to be in trouble. And then to strengthen and have guidance. Clergy draw strength and guidance from their relationship with God and empowering them in the ministry and their own personal life. You know, and one of the things that I've learned and I'm still learning is the importance of not only drawing strength from God, but drawing strength from healthy communities. Healthy communities has been very big for me, and I'm constantly always seeking healthy communities. Healthy communities don't mean that they always look like I look. Doesn't always mean that they talk like I talk and understand like I understand. But healthy community is someone that's going to really keep us centered and balanced. And then really understanding that call. The deep personal connection allows clergy, men and women, to gain clarity and understanding of the divine calling and enhancing their service. And some of the practices that has been very helpful for me, that inspired me to write 52 weeks journal of speaking and interceding and listening and trusting and responding to the Spirit of God through adversity and beyond, really came when the world was shut down with COVID. At that time, I was going through my internship as a mental health clinician, and I went from seeing 28 clients a week dealing with mental health and substance abuse to now seeing them online. That's when the whole online outburst really happened very quickly. Within 1 week to the next, we went from seeing clients every day face to face to now only seeing them online. And this was through social media. So I had to learn and adjust and make mental adjustments, because I can no longer utilize the senses that I would use by looking at someone's body language, reading, their eye movement. That was no longer, I could do that. But it took me to really learning how to adapt and adjust to help others, because my heart and passion was to do just that. So when we talk about practice of prayer and fasting, I think we all need a prayer closet. We all need to go to a place where we can just speak to God freely and then have a moment to listen to God. And that's what morning medicine is about. And I do have a few copies for those who are interested in purchasing those. But the connection with God, these practices foster a deeper connection with God and encouraging personal reflection and spiritual growth. And the clarity and focus is what's needed more than ever before. Because COVID hit, then the world shut down, our places of worship shut down, and then trying to get people back into the mode. And I have to be honest with everyone in the room. It was difficult for me to really encourage people to get back into the mood of coming in person because I was struggling with it. And I had to look in the mirror, and I went from preaching in a church, in a sanctuary, to setting up a podium in my living room, putting a cross on my wall, getting cameras, and really just having my way with God. And it took me back to homiletics class at Claremont, where we just preaching to a few people. And the cadence was different, because you don't have the call and response. So the cadence, but that really took me to a deeper connection, a deeper practicing of renewing myself when no one else was around. And I remember my kids, polishing off the pulpit in the living room. And I had my colleagues calling me on the phone. Where are you preaching from? Every church is supposed to be closed. I said, I'm in my living room. My living room became my sanctuary. And so some of the practices of renewing us and keeping us rejuvenated, we have to be creative. And then we talk about the depth of Scripture and study of spiritual rejuvenation. The depth of Scripture is crucial. Understanding biblical truths, really having sound theology, and equipping our clergy. That's one of the things that I'm very passionate about now, being consecrated as a bishop, is really empowering clergy. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't expect for anyone else to do it. And then the mental and emotional health. This is big. The weight of the call is huge. And the call is not only trying to hear from God, but also to respond to God. And responding to God when our context is constantly changing. And it's changing big time, even as we speak, with the fires, with now the rains. We're concerned about the mudslides. And so we're constantly changing. And how do we maintain this mental and emotional health of the weight of the call? Because despite of the fires, despite of the mudslides, despite of anything else, our parishioners are still calling on us to help them. And so how do we maintain a mental and emotional health with the weight of the call upon us? When we talk about the techniques of coping with stress, one of the things that I've found out is that stress will truly kill you. It will kill your joy. It will kill your passion. It will kill you even looking at the glass half full instead of half empty. It will kill us. And so when we talk about the techniques with coping, I think coping skills is crucial, especially for clergymen and women. We talk about mindfulness and practices. Mindfulness techniques such as meditation and deep breathing, that's something we can do anywhere, and no one has to know what you're doing. When you take deep breaths, hold it in, count to 3,000, and then breathe out slowly, you'll be surprised how that would regulate your heart, regulate your mind, and just regulate everything about you. When you're dealing with your family, dealing with your spouse, and things kind of go left, you just take some deep breaths and start breathing. Then regular exercise. I think Kimmy talked about that. One of the things when things shut down because of COVID, I was accustomed to going to Magic Johnson 24-hour fitness on a regular basis. But when everything shut down, there was no longer no Magic Johnson 24-hour fitness center. The first 2 weeks, I have to admit, I was happy. I was happy. I didn't have to go to church. I didn't have to go anywhere. And even when people needed me, I didn't have to move. I said everything shut down. So for the first couple months, it was great. I just ate, slept. It was wonderful. But then after 2 months, I was like, man, this is kind of weighing on me now mentally, because I'm not getting the exercise that I was accustomed to. And so I was sharing with my wife, I was like, man, what are we going to do? And so she didn't say much, and I was just trying to figure out, man, what can I do to cope with the stress of being isolated? Right? What can I do to cope with the stress of not being able to reach out to my loved ones who I could go to their house and check on them? We couldn't do that. And so one of the things we started doing was walking outside, outdoors. We had our mask on, we were walking, keeping our social distancing, but we were walking outdoors. That brought my wife and I closer together because now we got quality time. right? My wife was loving it because I was at home more. And as soon as the doors opened up and they started moving around, my wife said, I sure enjoyed COVID when things were shut down. I said, well, what do you mean? She said, because you spent more time at home. And that really helped me to see that not only did I need regular exercise, but I need effective time management. Time management between the parishioners, my wife, and my children, and even myself. So when we talk about coping and healthy coping skills, I want you to think about that. And even handling criticism and self-doubt, because trying to deal with a lot of people who is emotionally dysregulated, they will push us with a lot of criticism. And if you're not healthy, you can absorb that. There's a book called The 4 Agreements I love by Don Lewis. He says that we cannot take things personal. And one of the things of handling criticism is not taking things personal. And Don Ruiz talks about in his book's 4 Agreements, not only not to take things personal when people are criticizing you, but don't take things personal when people are lifting and pumping you up. But he says, he talks about keeping a neutral balance. And when you keep a neutral balance, no matter how much criticism comes your way, or even self-doubt within yourself, you'll maintain this balance because you're not taking things personal. And so when we talk about the impact of criticism, clergy frequently face criticism, which can significantly affect the self-esteem and emotional well-being. 2, constructive handling strategies is crucial. Developing constructive strategies for dealing with criticism helps clergy maintain confidence and emotional health. This is big for all of us, right? Right? Yes. And then maintaining emotional health. There's so many clergymen and women doing all of the things that we're dealing with, are struggling with depression, dealing with anxiety. And I think, just being able to have some healthy coping skills, identifying some of the triggers, understanding your trigger responses is crucial with maintaining this balance. And then building emotional resilience. The importance of emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is crucial for clergy to effectively navigate challenges and setbacks in their roles, because it happens to all of us, the best of us. We can be clinically sound, theologically sound, but we're still going to be dealing with challenges and setbacks. And then our support network. If you don't have a list of 7 people that you can reach out to when you're in need, that you trust, and they trust you to be honest, you're setting yourself up for failure. So building strong support networks can provide clergy with necessary encouragement and assistance during difficult times. Then self-care practices. And I always tell people all the time, self-care is the best care. As much as we love people, much as we are passionate about helping people, if we don't put the mask on ourselves first, we can do no one any good. So self-care is important. And one of the things I share with people all the time, especially clergymen and women, that if you don't take care of yourself, are you really being healthy and present for the ones you really care the most about? And if the answer is no, don't allow for people to make you feel guilty about putting yourself first, right? Just like when we're on the plane, they say put the mask on you first. Self-care has to come with us first. And then personal development, and this is why I love settings and contexts like these, because personal development is always helpful and inspiring for us all. But then navigating between the seasons of grief and loss while leading others, this is huge. And I always think about, if you don't mind me saying, Dr. Najuma, when she lost her son. When she lost her son, it really hit home because I saw the struggle of just being able to navigate when you fall into a season of losing a loved one, right? And grief and loss doesn't always mean death. Grief and loss means it could be a physical challenge that changed the way you move. Grief and loss doesn't necessarily mean death or a physical challenge, but it could also mean that you lost relationships, divorces. And so grief and loss goes a long way when we think about how to navigate through those seasons, because if we don't learn how to navigate through those seasons will navigate through us. Process of personal grief and trauma. The importance of addressing grief. Clergy must prioritize their own grief and trauma to provide effective support to others. And this is something I always look in the mirror at myself, the importance of addressing. When I left the Methodist Church and went independent, that was a grief and loss process for me because I was no longer going to the conferences, no longer going to the midwinter meetings, no longer having to pay those proportionments. It was grief and loss, right? But seeking counseling, and I share this with clergy, men and women all the time, it doesn't mean that we're weak when we seek out counseling, but it really means that we're strong, because when we can really be humble enough to let people know I'm not okay, that's the beginning of healing. But as long as we deny not being okay, that's when we continue to suffer in silence. So seeking counseling is important, and then peer support conversations is crucial as well. And supporting grieving congregations. One of the things I learned at Claremont in homiletics class is that if you don't prepare for your death, how can you prepare for anyone else in their death? Right? So I think we all have to go through that grieving process and really be honest and open with ourselves as clergy, and be compassionate caregivers and resources for healing. And then the balance of ministerial responsibility during grief is understanding grief, understanding the importance of self-care, and supporting our congregation. Then we call the balancing act. This is what I constantly strive for every day, is balancing the act of handling stress and expectations, coping with ministry pressures and criticism, self-awareness and resilient strategies, and breaking the mental health stigma. This is what I'm passionate about. This is why I moved from seeing clients every day to running groups, trauma groups, because I realize that help is all around us. But if we're not educated and empowered to identify the help and identify where we're hurting, then all of the great resources around us won't mean us any good, because we don't even know that we need them. So I'm big on breaking the mental health stigma, especially in the African American and Latino community, where a lot of our communities can be helped, but because of the stigma of mental health, they won't get the help that they need. So again, encouraging counseling and support, and then relational health, leading at home and in the church. We talked a little bit about that already. Nurturing relationships with spouses and children. I kind of alluded to that also, how important that is. Because the last thing that I want is to lead thousands of people and leave my family behind. That's the last thing I want. That would be a nightmare for me. And so I've learned over the years how to incorporate and pastor my own family first. And that has been very crucial for me as a pastor, is learning how to pastor my family first before I try to pastor the congregation. And then the balancing act between family life and congregational duties. We kind of talked about that, the importance of balance, setting priorities, and establishing boundaries. The importance of family-supported ministry. This is huge. Vital roles of family support, community involvement, and strengthening family ties is huge. Because if our family's good, we're good. And if we're good, our family's good. Setting healthy boundaries, and I'm going to stop here because I want us to understand the importance of setting healthy boundaries in ministry and protecting relationships from burnout. One of the things I want you guys to write down is when you talk about boundaries, think of these two things. Boundaries set limits, and they keep us safe. So anytime you're in a chaotic environment, think about what kind of boundaries need to be set. If you find yourself feeling unsafe in any situation, think about, man, what kind of boundaries do I need to make? Because setting boundaries will set limits of what people will say to you, what you will say to them, how they would treat you and how you would treat them, and it will keep you feeling safe. And when you're feeling safe, then you can keep the environment safe around you.